They thought it was over, that I'd just give up, back down, fold like a card table in the Texas wind. They saw one man standing at the edge of 30 acres, surrounded by silence, and thought easy pickings. But they made one fatal mistake. They built their fence 3 feet too far. Let me tell you a story that starts with quiet arrogance and ends with poetic justice. A story where a pen stroke on a land survey carried more power than any HOA president ever imagined. Where the little guy didn't just fight back, he built an empire at the foot of their gate. You ever been underestimated? Laughed at behind closed doors? That's what they did to me. They figured a man with goats, a pickup, and a toolbox couldn't possibly understand legal boundaries or fight their polished bureaucracy. But the thing about ranchers, we may look like we belong in the dirt, but we read contracts like war maps. When the Golden Meadows HOA sealed off the only access to my land with a smug little gate, they didn't just block a road. They triggered something, a principle, a fire. See, they didn't know that I held a legally recorded easement. They didn't care, because power doesn't ask permission, it assumes compliance. But I wasn't raised to kneel, and in that moment, staring at the metal barrier slicing my world in two, I didn't just see a fence, I saw opportunity. I saw a trap door out of their control. And while they were busy celebrating their security improvements, I was drafting blueprints, wiring circuits, making calls to old friends who owed me favors. What happened next turned their gated paradise into a toll-paying nightmare end. It all started with a 3-foot miscalculation. So buckle in, because this isn't just about a ranch. It's not even about land. It's about power. And what happens when the people who think they own the rules run headfirst into someone who read the fine print and decided to write his own chapter? You're about to learn how a rancher with a soldering iron and a grudge brought an entire HOA to its knees. They called it Golden Meadows, a name wrapped in luxury soft lawns and artificial lakes, but the truth was far grittier beneath the surface. Behind the white fences and manicured hedges sat a board of homeowners who believed in control, not community. Their decisions weren't made for the people, they were made for power, leverage, perception, and the HOA president, Maxwell Bennett, was the beating heart of that machine. He was the type that wore polished boots without a speck of dirt and had a handshake that felt like a legal contract. His smile was perfect, rehearsed and weaponized to disarm. He didn't just enforce the rules. He was the rules, and when he saw my land, my 30 acres of open ranch property, stretching like freedom just outside the gates of his planned paradise, he saw a problem. See, I wasn't part of his neighborhood. I wasn't subject to their regulations. I didn't pay their dues. I didn't mow my fields to code or paint my barn in their approved color palette to them. I was a blemish on the view a wild card. They couldn't tame, but instead of negotiating, Maxwell did what cowards do. He tried to box me in. Literally one morning, without warning, I woke up to the sound of digging and welding at the edge of my property. I grabbed my thermos and walked out to the road, and there it was, a brand new fence post anchored deep into the gravel and rising fast with a gate system attached. Not just any gate, a security checkpoint, complete with cameras, keypads, and a bold brass plaque that read, "Private entry residents only." They were cutting off the only legal road to my land. Now what Maxwell didn't know was that buried deep in the county registry was a recorded easement dating back to 1972. Giving me full access through that road, it was permanent, irrevocable, legally binding, but people like Maxwell don't believe in boundaries unless they draw them. He handed me a temporary access card with an expiration date and a smirk and told me to use it while I figured out a new solution. That wasn't just an insult, it was a declaration of war, he thought. I'd call a lawyer, maybe write a few angry letters, maybe even pack up and sell out, but he didn't understand something deeper than law, something rooted in the ground under my boots. I was raised with a code: when someone tries to steal your freedom, you don't run, you build. And I was about to build something that would make every car that passed through that gate remember my name asterisk. I didn't scream. I didn't protest. I didn't storm into a meeting and demand justice. I simply got quiet, still. The kind of stillness you feel right before a storm cracks open the sky. I drove into town, found my way to the county records office, and spent 3 hours digging through old filings with the patience of a hunter tracking something wounded. There it was. Easement 11C, filed July 14, 1972. Clear as day. My right to that road was sealed, decades before Golden Meadows even existed. But paper means nothing to people drunk on power. I brought it to Olivia. She's sharp, a real estate attorney with the kind of legal mind that can strip a lie bare in 3 questions. She reviewed the document, nodded, said I was fully in the right. But then she looked at me over the top of her glasses and gave me the hard truth. Legal battles take time, months, maybe years. And during that time, Maxwell could bury me in technicalities, ordinances, temporary restrictions. He'd bleed me dry with paperwork before I ever stepped into court. So I went back to the ranch and walked my land. I followed the fence they built, traced it with my hand like reading Braille. Then I found it. 3 feet of their new gate crossed into my property. Just 3 feet, but that was all I needed. It was a trespass, a breach, a fatal mistake. I called my buddy Ryan. He's a contractor, good with machines, better with secrets. Told him I needed something built. Quietly, we mapped it out together. Solar panels, backup batteries, license plate cameras, a barrier arm like the ones you see on toll roads. Then we dug post holes right next to their new gate. Only this time, on my land, my side, in 4 days we built a fully automated toll booth, the kind you couldn't ignore. No cash, no entry. Want to cross? That'll be $20. Or $100 for a monthly pass. The beauty? Every single car entering Golden Meadows had to pass through my land to get to their perfect little suburb. Every luxury SUV, every delivery truck, every real estate agent showing homes. Maxwell hadn't boxed me in. He'd built me a business. It started with just a few cars, neighbors on their morning commute, the Wilsons in their silver Lexus, a landscaping truck with lawnmowers rattling on the trailer. At first, they were confused, slowed down, rolled their windows down like maybe it was a prank, but the arm didn't lift until they paid. Some laughed and tapped their cards. Others grumbled. One woman threw her Starbucks at the booth and screamed about lawsuits, but they paid because they had no choice. The road wasn't theirs, it was mine, and I had simply decided to start charging rent for the privilege of crossing it by noon. The booth had processed 63 vehicles. That's $1,260 in one day. I sat on my porch with a glass of sweet tea, watching my motion-sensor dashboard light up every few minutes with another ping. License plates logged. Footage saved, toll collected. But it wasn't. About the money, not really. It was about the principle. They tried to trap me. And instead, I made their own plan work for me. That's the part they never see coming. Around 3 p.m., a black BMW screeched to a halt at the booth. Out stepped Maxwell Bennett, his shirt still tucked in from whatever meeting he'd stormed out of. He marched up to the barrier, red-faced and furious, demanded I lift it, said I was obstructing community infrastructure. I didn't even go down to greet him. I just clicked the speaker on and calmly said, "The toll is $20. You can pay with card or phone." Said I was extorting the neighborhood. Officer Ramirez showed up within the hour. Good man. I showed him the land surveys, the easement papers, the footage, the GPS coordinates. He looked it all over in silence. Then he turned to Maxwell and said the magic words. "This is a civil matter." Maxwell's mouth fell open. He sputtered. Something about legal action. Officer Ramirez just tipped his hat and left. The barrier stayed down. That night, I added floodlights, reinforced the base with steel rods, upgraded the cameras to infrared. If they wanted war, they'd get it. But it would be quiet, legal, profitable, and documented. Every step the next. Morning, I woke up to news vans at the gate. The sky was still pink with dawn when I heard the first engine rumble. I stepped out onto the porch and saw 2 news vans idling at the toll booth. One was local, the other was from a regional affiliate. Cameramen hopped out. A young reporter fixed her hair in the mirror. They weren't here by accident. Someone had tipped them off. Probably one of the residents tired of being caught in the middle of a power struggle, or maybe someone hoping to shame me into backing down. But shame doesn't work on a man who knows he's right. I brewed a pot of coffee, walked down in my boots, and greeted them like old friends. That's when it hit me. The power of the narrative was shifting. They didn't come to scold me. They came because something about this story was bigger than property lines. It was about overreach, control, a lone man standing against a faceless board, and that makes people listen. That's when the question started. Why build a toll booth? Why not go through the courts? Was this revenge? or justice? I answered every one with clarity. I showed them the fences, GPS coordinates, the survey maps, the outdated permit they'd filed with the county. I laid it all out like a surgeon, showing an X-ray. Then I said something that made the cameraman pause. If they had built the fence 1 foot to the left, this wouldn't have been possible. But they got greedy. They crossed into my land, and I don't give up what's mine. The story aired that night. It wasn't buried on page 12. It was front and center on the evening news. Local rancher outsmarts HOA with toll road. The footage showed cars lining up, people paying. Maxwell pacing angrily, and me calm, lawful, unshaken. Then came the calls. From bloggers, podcasters, a freedom-focused website offered to syndicate the footage. A YouTube channel interviewed me about land rights and self-sufficiency. I became a symbol. Not because I planned it, but because I stood still while everyone else panicked. And that's when things escalated. Not in court, not in public, but under cover of night. That toll booth became a target. Asterisk, it started on a Tuesday, just after midnight. I was in bed, half asleep, when my security app pinged twice, motion detected. I opened the feed and saw 3 shadows creeping. Near the booth, they weren't kids, too steady, too methodical. I zoomed in. One of them was holding a crowbar. Another was carrying a spray can. They didn't know the cameras had night vision. And they definitely didn't know the footage was streaming live to a backup server off-site. They smashed the keypad, yanked at the card reader, painted over one lens. But they missed the one tucked beneath the solar panel. I watched silently, not with fear, but with clarity, because in that moment, everything changed. They'd crossed a new line. It wasn't just about land anymore. It was about intimidation, destruction, the desperate flailing of men who'd already lost the war, and didn't know it yet. I didn't call the police right away. No, I wanted a clean hand. I let them finish, let them disappear into the dark. Then I went down and surveyed the damage. Broken screen, bent arm, graffiti scrawled across the steel. It didn't matter. They couldn't touch the backbone. The real system, the guts were protected. The power bank was sealed. The data untouched. They had destroyed the surface, but not the structure. By sunrise, the footage was online. I didn't post it anonymously. I uploaded it under my own name, Maxwell's face, in high definition. Spray, can in hand, the other 2 HOA board members, one of them wearing a jacket with the community logo. There was no hiding now, no spinning this into security concerns. It was pure sabotage. The reaction was immediate. Residents flooded the HOA's message board. Emails flew. Patricia, the vice president, tried to distance herself, said she had no knowledge, but screenshots showed she'd RSVP'd to a late-night strategy session. She was in it up to her neck. And the police, they came this time. Officer Ramirez again.com, professional. He watched the footage, took statements, and said the magic words. Criminal mischief, vandalism, trespassing charges would be filed. Maxwell tried to call me. I let it ring. Then I texted back one line. Speak to my attorney. They thought they could scare me. They thought if they broke my machine, I'd back down. But I don't fold. I rebuild. And this time, I wasn't just rebuilding a booth. I was building a case. Asterisk. The new toll booth rose from the gravel like a monument. Taller, wider, reinforced steel columns anchored in fresh concrete. Double-layered, bullet-resistant polycarbonate. On all exposed panels, not because I feared gunfire, but because I wanted them to know I wasn't playing defense anymore. This wasn't a booth. It was a boundary between what they could control and what they would never touch again. I added motion-activated floodlights, a second camera tower, live intercoms connected to a cloud-based AI assistant that logged every transaction, facial recognition for pass holders, license plate scanning. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about presence, permanence, a digital wall that watched everyone who tried to cross my line. When the townspeople saw it, something shifted. They used to laugh about the toll road, call it petty or theatrical. But after the vandalism came to light, everything changed. The community began to see it not as a joke, but as justice. Proof that someone could stand up to the machine and win. One truck driver dropped off a six-pack and said, "You're doing what all of us wish we could." A retired vet handed me a $100 bill and said, "Keep going." Even former HOA residents ones who had long been silent started reaching out. They told me things, that Maxwell had been skimming landscaping contracts for years, that board meetings often ended in private deals, that the whole luxury development pitch had been a cover for rezoning. The HOA wasn't protecting the community, it was packaging it for profit. And now that I was in their ways, they were panicking. You could feel it. Maxwell didn't show up at the next meeting. Patricia resigned 2 days later. Their lawyer tried sending a cease and desist for harassment. Olivia sent back a certified letter containing a copy of the footage and a civil lawsuit draft. We weren't backing off. We were moving in by now. The story had spread beyond Texas. I got calls from news outlets. A podcast did a full episode. They called it The Man Who Made a Road His Castle. But I didn't want fame. I wanted accountability. I wanted people to understand the cost of silence, of letting petty tyrants chip away at rights, because no one wants to cause trouble. I caused trouble. I made noise. I built something they couldn't ignore. And I wasn't finished. The legal storm hit fast and loud. Maxwell, finally cornered, filed an injunction against me, claiming I was obstructing a community access route. Their argument was that I was restricting emergency services and endangering residents. But we were. Ready? Olivia dropped a stack of documents, thicker than the county phone book, right on the judge's bench. Certified surveys, drone footage, time-stamped logs of every emergency vehicle that passed through. The booth had a dedicated emergency override system, which no one from the HOA had ever requested access to. We had planned for everything. They hadn't done in court. Maxwell's attorney tried to paint me as unstable, a tech-obsessed recluse building, dystopian structures in the Texas woods, but the judge wasn't buying it. When Olivia played the footage of Maxwell and his cronies spray-painting my cameras and smashing the first booth, the whole courtroom shifted. The judge leaned back and asked only one question. Did they know they were on your land when they did this? I nodded. He did too. Injunction denied. Word spread like wildfire. Residents of Golden Meadows started attending HOA meetings in droves. Not to listen to revolt. They demanded answers. Why had thousands of dollars been spent on a gate that was never approved in a community vote? Why was their president on trial for vandalism? Why were they just now hearing about the easement their board had ignored? The HOA's grip was slipping fast. Meanwhile, I kept improving the toll booth. I integrated blockchain payment options, added multilingual support, designed an app that let pass holders request temporary visitor codes for family and friends. Suddenly, what started as a defense mechanism became a functioning piece of infrastructure, one that outperformed the HOA's own systems. Residents began whispering that maybe I should be the one running things. I laughed, not interested. I didn't want power. I just wanted peace and the freedom to defend it. Then, out of the blue, a real estate developer contacted me, said he loved what I'd built, asked if I'd consider licensing the tech. He had other communities where residents felt powerless against HOAs. That's when I realized this wasn't just a battle for my land. This was a prototype for something bigger, a system that could balance control, that could give homeowners a voice, and maybe, just maybe, break the monopoly of bad governance. One stand, one spark. That's all it took. The HOA was crumbling from the inside. Board members began resigning one after another. Patricia, the vice president, was the first to go. She stood up at a meeting, looked Maxwell dead in the eye, and said she refused to be part of a vendetta disguised as governance. The crowd erupted in applause. That clip made it to the local news. From there, everything spiraled. Residents started organizing their own committee, not under the HOA charter, independently. They called themselves the Meadow Reform Coalition, and they started digging. Hard, they uncovered invoices for luxury dinners billed to the HOA card. Thousands in landscaping fees that were paid but never done. A shell company linked to one of Maxwell's cousins that received multiple security. Upgrade contracts. Fraud, pure and simple. And all of it funded by the same people Maxwell claimed to protect. The residents, the neighborhood that once welcomed him as a savior, now saw him for what he was, a bully in a suit. And I was no longer just the rancher at the edge of town. I was the one who stood up when everyone else stayed silent. The booth kept running, smoothly, respectfully. Families would wave as they passed. Kids would shout out the window, "Thank you, Mr. Ethan." I became something I never expected to be, a symbol of resistance. Not the armed kind, but the kind that uses wires and code, and the law to build a fortress nobody can tear down without consequences. And that's when the county stepped in. An official reached out, asking for a meeting. I expected another fight, but instead he offered support. He said, "What you've done here is impressive. The way you handled legal pressure, the way you maintained order." He asked if I'd consider consulting on rural infrastructure. There were ranchers like me all over the state dealing with HOA encroachments and private road disputes. Suddenly, the booth was no longer just mine. It was a blueprint. I had tapped into something deeper than a land feud. I had exposed a flaw in how power flows in gated communities. A flaw built on intimidation and apathy. And when someone pushed back with brains instead of fists, it all came crashing down. Not because I wanted to be a hero, but because I refused to be a victim. They tried to fence me in, but I turned their fence into a gate, and that gate now makes money every single day. Asterisk. I want you to think about something. Every law ever written, every gate ever built, every rule they try to enforce. None of it works unless you believe they have the right to control you. That's the dirty little secret no one tells you. Power isn't in the paperwork, it's in your perception. And once you stop giving them that power, once you start asking real questions, everything changes. That's what happened here. It started with a letter, a smirk, a fence, and it ended with a community waking up to who really had control all along. The HOA thought they were above the law. They built a wall thinking I'd go away quietly. They underestimated what happens when a person actually understands their rights. They thought my silence was surrender. But it was strategy. I didn't fight with fists. I fought with land surveys, with cameras, with state statutes, and a toll arm that didn't blink. And when they broke the law to retaliate, didn't back down, I documented, I exposed. I let their own actions become the noose they hung themselves with. You need to understand this. You are not powerless. You don't need to scream to win. You don't need to break the law to push back. What you need is knowledge. The kind of knowledge they hope you never take the time to learn. The kind that turns a fence meant to trap you into a tool that sets you free. That's what this whole story is about. Not a road, not a toll, but a mindset shift, a blueprint for anyone who's ever felt backed into a corner by bureaucracy or bullies. And when it was all over, when the HOA folded, the board resigned, and the development deal collapsed, I didn't just feel relief. I felt purpose. I kept the toll booth running for a while, but eventually I removed the arm. Left the structure up as a symbol. People still visit it, still take pictures, still tell the story, because it reminds them that one person with a soldering iron, a camera, and a copy of the county records can topple a machine built on fear and silence. So next time someone tells you to sit down, to pay up, to move along, don't stand your ground. Read the fine print, and never let someone fence you off from what's rightfully yours, because sometimes the road less traveled is the one you charge $20 to drive through.